Okay, look, before you start angrily typing away in the comments section, lambasting me for my absolutely god-awful dumb dick fucking take because I just don't get it.
You fuckhead. That is the stupidest thing you interpreted there.
Hear me out. Falcon and the Winter Soldier is not great, but it's also not the most egregious offense the MCU has put forth. Sorry, Dark World. And you know what? That's okay. By and large, I recognize the significance and importance of Sam Wilson becoming the next Captain America and what the mere image of that means for hundreds of thousands of people, and I love the show for that alone. It's beautiful to see Sam finally step into the spotlight as an aspirational beacon of hope. I just wish the journey to him picking up the shield was as powerful and impactful as the image I just described. If anything, Falcon and the Winter Soldier is insanely frustrating because of its proximity to being something truly compelling and great. Every soaring high is undercut by an even worse low, and while it's nice to see the MCU try to engage with real-world issues, I just wish they would have fully committed instead of presenting all of these half measures, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's set the stage, shall we? Some of the most frustrating works of art are the ones that stand on the shoulders of giants rather than offer up greatness in their own right. There are hundreds of mediocre remakes and 4 sequels that we could rag on for days on end for being cheap cash grabs that add nothing to the original work that spawned them. But none may be a greater nuisance than when a long-standing franchise takes its greatest entries and just misses the mark in a continuation. Captain America the Winter Soldier is not only the greatest film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in my opinion, but it's also one of the greatest comic book films ever made, featuring a realistic threat, deep character work, one of Chris Evans' best performances, and some of the most memorable action set pieces of the series. It also set the stage for Captain America Civil War and created tectonic shifts in the MCU's narrative that rippled out all the way to Infinity War and Endgame. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is the follow-up to all of this. On the one hand, it's the return of Sam and Bucky, who both got blipped for 5 years, having come back to life just in time to lose Steve Rogers. But the show also rides the coattails of the Winter Soldier and Civil War hard. There's obviously an aesthetic through line here, from the color palette to Henry Jackman's triumphant yet electric score, but it's more than that. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier goes beyond being a laudatory follow-up, instead trying to copy the most successful things about both films without really understanding either one. We get the whiz-bang of the action sequences, the style, the badassery, but with a hollowed-out imitation of the conversations those earlier films sparked. There's nothing in this show save for the 2nd or 5th episode, but, we'll get to that later, that is executed even remotely as well as the commentary on government overwatch in The Winter Soldier, or the exploration of ideological fractures in Civil War. Instead, they make a show where everyone sees their hero because the show has nothing to say at all, as if afraid to take a side. People on the right see John Walker as being in the right, lefties view the Flag Smashers as justified, and speaking of the Flag Smashers, we have a new platoon of super soldiers running around. There's a conversation that is incited as a result of their actions surrounding superheroes and their place in the world. You would expect Bucky, being a super soldier himself, to be one of the first people to chime in on this conversation. What we get instead is Bucky sitting off to the side while everyone else gives their opinion, with Sam almost using Bucky's words as his own, which encapsulates an issue of the show presenting different views just to do so without a care from whose mouth it comes out of. But back to everyone seeing their hero, Sam is an enlightened centrist for much of the first few episodes, which is bizarre given how his family and own people have been wronged by the US government for years. He's basically treated like a black athlete, beloved on the field, subject to an unfair shot off the field. Yet he's on the fence? It seems to me like that wouldn't be the case, but God forbid Captain America leans more towards one political direction than the other. I mean, it's not like the inception of the character involved punching Nazis or anything. Look, I get that this is a Marvel show. It's not a Jean Le Carre novel, nor is it supposed to be this heady, dense social commentary you'd find in, say, Spike Lee's Malcolm X. I don't think any reasonable person is expecting a superhero miniseries, even one with more serious undertones like this, to dig that deep. There'd be too much of a tonal and sensory disconnect. But if the show is going to view its themes, its commentary from such a distance, if they're going to half-ass the delivery, they'd have been better off just giving us Falcon flying around and Bucky beating the shit out of people for 6 hours instead. In fact, the show is so off base in many ways, maybe we should just change the name to Captain Tone Police and the Winter Centrist, eh? Yeah, maybe? I don't know. But let's get back on track. Let's talk about Sam Wilson, a character who has all the makings to be the perfect Captain America for our times, yet the show, for the most part, either sidelines Sam or makes him a walking contradiction. It embodies everything wrong with the show. It doesn't know how to articulate the ideas it seeks to engage with. Until Sam meets Isaiah Bradley, a black superhero created by the government in secret, sent on suicide missions, cruelly experimented upon and erased from history, and becomes aware of his plight, his explanations for why he gave up the shield have been largely vague and give the impression of him being unable to articulate his behavior, even to himself. Does he feel crushed by the weight of expectation, the impossibility of living up to the ideal of a perfect man? Who knows? When Steve was given the serum, he transcended from soldier to symbol. Does Sam, a mere man, feel unworthy of the same? All of these seem plausible, but the Isaiah Bradley scene lends his struggle another dimension. Sam isn't quite sure how to represent a country that, historically, hasn't represented him. Sadly, the show doesn't trust viewers to grasp this implication, immediately following the scene with another in which Sam's race is weaponized against him as he gets hounded by Baltimore cops. Sam faces discrimination here and has in the past as well, and isn't afforded the same luxuries as his white Avenger team members. Yet, he's written to say to another group of oppressed and discriminated against refugees who have been discarded, "I agree with your fight, I just don't agree with the way you're fighting it." Why the hell would Sam feel that way? He's literally experienced the discrimination of the blip with his sister firsthand, on top of serving for a country that doesn't seem to value his life. He shouldn't be talking down to a group that he clearly sides with. And it's a commonplace talking point from tone-deaf white people to say that kind of thing. It's kind of wild that Sam Wilson is the character they would have spouting all of this. And at the end of the day, the Flag Smashers aren't villains. What they fight for, to give everyone a fair shake, is, maybe idealistic, but it's a morally good thing. It's something that really sticks out now in particular, not even a year removed from the nationwide Black Lives Matter protests, to have that kind of "I agree with your fight, but don't fight it that way" sentiment ejected into a widely watched show. It makes you think of how all of the anti-Black Lives Matter people love to bring up Martin Luther King Jr. He's weaponized by them in this kind of nonsense gotcha argument. He believed in peaceful protest and whatnot. They wash away all of the radical stuff that MLK believed, sanitizing him as a figure. Falcon and the Winter Soldier feels like it's doing exactly that, saying, "Oh yeah, we'll talk about the race relations stuff, but we're going to demonize this revolutionary group." Likewise, sanitizing the real nature of black oppression and black empowerment. Sam and the Flag Smashers are fighting the same thing, but, God forbid we give them a fair shake. Instead, let's make it digestible for suburban white people, and let's use our black lead as the vessel with which to do so. There's an entire conversation between Sam and Carly in episode 4 that's well delivered and, I guess one of the more interesting discussions in the show, but it also kind of functions just to hammer the point home that Sam is a centrist. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that entire conversation is simply a "where on the political spectrum do you fall" conversation. I liked how he was able to relate to her, and we saw Sam using his superpower gifts as a mediator, helping veterans returning home from war, but it's also annoying that it falls victim to the trope of the headstrong antagonist bursting in to disrupt progress right away as they were on the cusp of a breakthrough. Again, I like the scene in theory, but in execution, it basically amounts to nothing. But then they follow that up by having Carly go threaten Sam's family, which is a complete betrayal of who she is yet again. They had her blow up a building with innocent people inside of it because the show had to condemn her, had to reduce her sympathy, even though being a Robin Hood figure doesn't, 1, make you a terrorist, or 2, a murderer. Carly clearly showed compassion and love for her fellow man, hence her fight for equality. Yet the show shifts gears to frame her as a supremacist? I don't know about you, but I'm not buying it. Every chance they have to paint the Flag Smashers with the empathy and sympathy they deserve, they undercut it with something that seemingly goes against Carly's character. I don't see the same treatment with John Walker, who is by far the most interesting character in the show, and that is not saying that I believe in him and his actions, but he is compelling, and he's obviously the character the writers had the most interest in constructing. They show him as just this veteran who was tasked with a job, and he's just trying to do that job to the best of his abilities. Yet, the show's fan base keep dogging on him as if some weird idea was incepted into their minds before going in. He's not some racist alt-right fascist, and that doesn't change just because some of those alt-righties have turned him into their poster boy on Twitter, which again goes back to the fact that everyone sees their hero because the show says nothing at all. Everything that makes Walker more of an antagonist has to do with the construct of the United States military. Yet again, the show refuses to really call into question the country's institutional problems, but rather the lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Walker is a complex character that definitely follows the Homelander mold from The Boys, and again, it's great. He's given sympathy, but the problem is the show almost wants you to feel entirely for him and not at all for Carly. Never mind the fact he just decapitates someone with the Captain America shield, the show still affords him sympathy with Bucky and Sam coming to him and saying that they understand why he did what he did. Also, while we're on the topic of that jaw-dropping moment in episode 4, Lamar dying essentially renders Zemo's observations on supremacy from episode 3 correct. It goes to show that it was all lip service with the talk of how the government uses black bodies because the show went on to sacrifice a major black character just to motivate the white guy. That's almost textbook performative politics from the series, and it's kind of disturbing. And you know what? I'm sure the show is going to somehow get the wrong message out of Walker murdering that guy. It'll be like, it's because he wasn't worthy, like Steve was. This is how they get around committing to any of the criticisms they flirted with through Zemo. Instead of doubling down on the super soldier stuff, they can scapegoat with, well, Sam is different. The irony of this is that entire conversation in the graveyard between Carly and the Flag Smasher Walker later murders about what kind of person Captain America needs to be in the modern era is so true. Cap needs to be someone who stands for all Americans, represents the oppressed, and isn't afraid to, sometimes get their hands dirty or call into question the powers that be. Hell, even Steve did that in both of his Cap films. In short, it'd be nice if the show stopped teasing interesting ideas only to side skirt around them and take the easy route. Challenge the audience, for God's sake. The system radicalized Walker, Carly, and Isaiah Bradley. The latter of the two were failed by it, while the former was abused by it. Sam was able to rise above that, and that's definitely a good thing, but it's also kind of awful that the show would frame the idea that those who are radicalized are automatically wrong. The real world doesn't work in such a black and white way, and just because Sam is able to rise above something doesn't make him a better person by default. Yes, radicalization adds an angle of sympathy to all three characters, and Sam acknowledges that, but the show also paints them as being wrong, rather than exploring the nuances of their actions and positions and allowing the audience to make their own determinations. This is especially true of Carly and the Flag Smashers. But you know what? There's one character that we sort of teased and danced around, and that is Daniel Bruhl's Zemo. Zemo is an odd addition. He's basically a contradiction of when we last met him in Civil War. There, he was a working-class guy whose family was murdered by the actions of government agents, billionaires, and superhumans, aka the Avengers, and so his quest to dismantle them and killing the remaining super soldiers makes sense. He almost has an eat-the-rich mentality. But when we meet him in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, he's essentially Eastern European royalty? A baron? I mean, I get that it's comic accurate, but that completely undoes the one element that made him far more sympathetic and relatable. That being said, after you get over the hurdle of the Zemo recharacterization, he actually becomes one of the most reasonable voices in the show. As we previously mentioned, he calls into question the notion of super soldiers and how the idea of super soldiers is a a supremacist ideology. If we're going to stick with comparisons to The Boys, Zemo is basically Billy Butcher. Zemo works for the most part because he's a true anti-hero. He doesn't discriminate or take sides. He's a true believer and follower in his own beliefs, and is further vindicated in those beliefs when he sees what happens with Walker, Lamar, and the Flag Smashers. Yet, this is also frustrating because he views Steve Rogers as the exception when he didn't before. It's almost like the show is, again, afraid to acknowledge that while heroes can by and large be exceptional people and do great things, they can also have flaws. Steve's undying loyalty to Bucky is clearly a flaw at times, despite being a virtuous trait. I mean, Zemo in Civil War even makes the case that, oh, there is a flaw on this poster child. He's got a bit of green in his supposed blue eyes. Zemo in Civil War had the balls to say that, while Zemo in Falcon and the Winter Soldier wouldn't dare go that far. His speech about how the super soldiers inherently believe they are superior was dead on and probably one of the most cutting, insightful things the show has to say. And then the show goes, hey, look, hey, buddy, but not the Avengers, right?
Hey, those aren't friends you're talking about.
They're good people who would never think they're superior to anyone, which completely misses Zemo's point. Thinking you're superior doesn't always mean lauding over people and being malicious, but the Avengers' existence alone has an inherent superiority. That's what Zemo's saying, but the show doesn't have the balls to really deconstruct its heroes. That's why we have Zemo saying Steve was the exception, which, as we've just stated, is absolutely not how he felt in Civil War. Because the writers are afraid to take a strong stance on social or political issues or criticize their beloved heroes, the show continues to be wishy-washy, convoluted, and apolitical while pretending to be the opposite, and its character work is suffering as a direct consequence. If you're not going to create a commentary on how superpowers inherently create a hierarchical inequality, then don't build a character around that idea only to drop it. It's like they're introducing interesting ideas because they want credit for saying something about them, but they don't actually have anything to say. It's all smoke and mirrors. For example, things were better during the blip. What does that mean? What's the through line between half the population being wiped out and things being better? Saying that without elaboration is worse than not saying it at all, and just raises questions without any semblance of an answer. It's also a weird sentiment to have the Flag Smashers express because back in my day tends to be such an opposing thought to the ideology of those who want to progress society and make the world a better place, which seems to be the fundamental goal of the Flag Smashers. It's muddled and contradictory messaging which only serves to make them easier to villainize. If we're being honest, Zemo v Flag Smashers is a much more interesting ideological fight because they're both compelling and largely on the right side of things. Zemo is great, despite how the show chooses to frame him. Same goes for Carly and the Flag Smashers. She's great, despite how the show insists that she's compromised, whereas Sam and Bucky are a little less interesting than what the show would have you believe. Now, I've gotten a lot off my chest. Does this seem like a bunch of tangents just sort of grouped together to you, like I'm making muddled points that don't really connect? Well, part of that is intentional because that's the problem with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. There's too much going on. It's even possible that some of the show's issues could have been ironed out if there weren't so many moving parts. Let's take inventory, shall we? We've got Sam, Bucky, Zemo, Walker, Battlestar, Carly, Flag Smashers, Power Broker, Isaiah Bradley, Dora Milaje, Sharon, Sam's tech guy who's done absolutely fuck all this entire time except get curb stomped by a super soldier, and, some other things I'm probably forgetting. It's entirely too much. How do you even begin to wrap all of this up? This is a big reason why, for over half its length, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier feels like it's treading water. There's no clear aim, and it's all so muddy. Sharon Carter especially, who I was enthusiastic about seeing get an upgrade in this series, is completely pointless and, again, doesn't even feel like the same character from Civil War. Now, granted, she's been through a lot, but she still doesn't even remotely resemble who Sharon Carter is, and she's pretty insufferable now, if I do say so. Or actually, if we just listen to Bucky, I'm pretty sure Bucky says that she's the worst.
Uh-oh. She's kind of awful now.
I have to agree with that. On top of that, she's nothing more than a plot device. Oh, and don't even get me started on the whole conversation about smuggling art or whatever, where they talk down to Sam like he's an absolute moron, which is unfortunately a common problem throughout the entirety of episode 3. I'm okay with the Dora Milaje's initial involvement when Io talks to Bucky. After all, Zemo killed T'Chaka, but why is there a fight scene pitting them against the other heroes? It's another weird MCU mandated cameo, complete with an egregious action sequence, which is really annoying considering how restrained this show has been in that respect. Plus, just like with John Walker screwing up Sam's attempt to get through to Carly, the Dora Milaje literally only make the situation worse as Zemo escapes. It's even worse in episode 5 as Zemo's very next scene just features him being captured again. They just padded the screen time to arrive at the same result. It's also unfortunate because both Zemo and Sharon Carter now wind up being nothing more than a plot device to drive the story or set up future MCU installments. God damn it, Marvel, this show is a rewrite or two away from being great. Episode 5 feels like it was the thesis statement, the first episode written, but then the creators needed to find a way to get to all of its good ideas and payoffs. As a result, we get the haphazard, nonsensical BS from the show's first 4 hours leading up to the first really good one. When we get to episode 5, for the first time in this show, an episode left me thinking about Sam. I love how he's basically humbled and re-examines everything. While it's too little too late and it doesn't completely work, it does try to make sense of his off-color comments in earlier episodes, which I'll give him a little bit of credit there. The way that episode 5 improves the writing for Sam is personified best in this scene with Isaiah Bradley. First things first, give Carl Lumbly an Emmy nomination. Anthony Mackie is an incredible actor, but Lumbly just absolutely steals these moments and elicits such an empathetic and sympathetic performance during these 5 minutes, truthfully, much like he did in his previous scene in episode 2. It never distracts from who the lead is. The scene is as much about Sam as it is about Isaiah Bradley, but it deepens our understanding of this supporting character, as well as just as how it forces Sam to contemplate Captain America, it finally lets the show inside the audience's head as well. This scene is the show daring to unambiguously critique the idea of Captain America. Unlike side quest Zemo, who just presents an idea and then automatically has it swatted down by the other characters in the room, including Sam Wilson. This time, though, Sam has no rebuttal. There's an immense tragedy to this scene. Isaiah gave everything to fight for his country. He watched every other man around him literally die for the same cause, and then he himself was treated lesser than a lab rat for so long that he lost his only child in the interim. And why? Because he didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes. Steve Rogers benefited from privilege, and while that isn't his fault, it's important to acknowledge that distinction. The legacy of the Shield and of Captain America is forever stained with that fact. The impact of this scene brings Sam back to his family, but more than that, it allows Sam and Bucky to not only reconcile, but come to terms with where they both are as people. And while it's a beautiful scene of just two friends and colleagues having a conversation about deep, important issues, it feels like a course correction for their characters and for the show, as their constant bickering is a prolonged argument that never seems to develop until it's suddenly flipped in this one scene. Again, it's a beautiful scene on its own, and I love it, but it's serviceable at best in the grand scheme of things, as the show does the bare minimum required for character progression yet again. It's just really unfortunate that we didn't get to this sooner. Episode 5 represents the first time the show has really taken a firm position rather than presenting the idea of one and then sweeping it under the rug. So really, if you think about it, episode 5 has made the problems worse because I'm seeing the glimmer of greatness. I see what this series should have and could have been. Judging truth individually, I really do love it. It's just hard to applaud it when the past 4 episodes have done almost nothing to tee up these payoffs. Consistency is what builds character, builds arcs, builds resonance, rewatchability, longevity, and I know these payoffs could be so good if they were established right. The show can't pick what the hell it wants to focus on and whose motivations it wants to develop. everyone is really surface level because they're not utilizing the runtime effectively. And then episode 5 is supposed to be a payoff before the big battle, and I'm just like, none of this is connecting at all. There is greatness within the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The problem is, it appears so sparsely throughout that the stretches in between not only make us wait for it, but send us on frustrating tangents. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. Hopefully I made my case for why I feel the way I do about Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It's not an egregious offense by any means. It's not one of the worst things the MCU has put out, but it really disappointed me, and I think part of the fact is just there's so much potential. But again, guys, I want to know what you all think about the series down in the comments section below, and do you think there's going to be a season 2? I think there probably will be, so let's have a great conversation down there. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe to the FilmSpeak channel so you don't miss out on future video essays, television coverage, movie coverage, all that great stuff. We like to say the conversation continues after the credits, and of course we'd love to have you be a part of that conversation. So the next video, I know those of you who have been following the channel for a good bit know that I have been teasing a Quantum of Solace video, and guys, I'm very happy to report that it's coming. It is coming. It is going to be the next video that we put out here on the FilmSpeak channel, coming the first week of May. Lock it down. It's happening. No more delays. We're going to be giving you our ultimate definitive video on Quantum of Solace, so you can have that to look forward to. But until then, guys, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at GriffSchiller. All right, that's going to do it for this video, guys, and I will catch you next time. Take care.